this whole Russia-Ukraine stuff, it's like a movie. It's like it's like the, what was it, the book?
Art of War.
Art of War. Like the things that Putin is doing right now. And I think all of us here, we're not too surface level to be like, oh, you know, whatever we see on the news, whatever we see on surface level things, whatever the media is trying to tell us is not always the truth.
Yeah.
Especially myself, when it first came out and everyone was like putting the solidarity colors of Ukraine and showing support for Ukraine, I was like, this is a mass propaganda.
Yeah.
What is the reality here? Why is Putin and Russia being demonized? Why is everybody automatically going to Ukraine and supporting them? In the beginning, it looks like, okay, they've invaded and that's pretty messed up. But when I started to look into it and Wally would tell me more, I'm like, okay, it's actually maybe the complete opposite.
Yeah.
So I wanted to throw an open question and I want to discuss this topic. And if you have any thoughts to chime in.
So with Russia and Ukraine, what we're seeing with this unification process they're pretty much trying to do, it's nothing new, right? This has been going on for a long time. Even in near-term history, in 2014, 2015, they attempted the same type of invasion as well, right? Yeah. But that's their own country's unification plans and trying to develop their economy further and so forth. But on the Western side of media, they're going to create propaganda to feed the U.S. military complex, right? Every week, ever since Russia started invading Ukraine, you've been seeing the U.S. send billions of dollars in military aid, financing, and packaging. And to the Western side of the media, they say it's aid. They say, oh, we're helping Ukraine. But this is all debt at the end of the day that's being owed from Ukraine back to the U.S. And if they're not going to be able to pay it back with money, more than likely, the U.S. ends up taking advantage of Ukrainian resources, Ukrainian land, and setting up more NATO bases there and setting up more military complex there. So it all just ends up being a big factor to fuel the U.S. military complex, where then the U.S. uses their media power to make Russia just look purely like the bad guy, make Ukraine look like the victim, and make them look like the savior that's trying to come and help and save Ukraine.
You think it's that angle that the US wants to kind of like put debt that they can't afford and therefore take control like they do in Africa? Is that the objective, or is it more that kind of a NATO advancing their front to the doorstep of Russia and it's more a play like
it's
that?
all one.
I think it's like I think it's like what's that saying? Hitting two birds with one stone.
Okay.
I think it's that type of both are being taken advantage of there for sure.
No, it's the same thing. If like Russia was to open up a military base in Mexico, Mexico's getting invaded tomorrow. Like
Yeah,
so
100%.
you can't demonize Russia for doing the same thing, that the same reactions that anyone else would have.
Yeah,
And this whole thing of like, how's Ukraine? On paper, 200 billion from the US has been given in aid. How's Ukraine going to pay that back?
exactly. Right.
And then all the statistics are off. Like they say, like 2 million people have left Ukraine and maybe 150,000 have died. But the actual population of Ukraine has halved since the war has started.
Yeah.
Maybe 3 million people have died. At least 15 million people have left the country. But then now you got half the population. All your working class people are all wiped out. So you're just left with elderlies and kids that can't work. You've got 200 billion plus worth of debts to pay with the interest on top. They're just going to take control of the fertilizers, the grain silos,
All the resources,
all the
everything,
resources
right?
that they have.
And
Control of the Black Sea.
And it's
which is
very
another one.
very common. We've seen with the U.S. to do this historically. They did the same thing in Iraq, right? They did the same thing in the Middle East, where they bring and say, we're bringing a democracy. We're trying to help your people. And they end up just completely destabilizing the country and taking over all the resources, right?
You know, the people are clocking on though. The people are noticing because every time I see now like a video of like some oil deposit has been found or any black liquid on the floor,
You
the
see a
comments are
meme.
democracy coming soon.
Yeah, democracy coming soon.
The U.S. flag is coming in.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is, I think when we look at China, they're a lot smarter with their tactics, where the U.S. is always like military, war, invasion, takeover. But like you were talking about with Africa, China is doing something very similar in Africa, but more just from an economic front. They'll go to these very poor, underdeveloped nations and say, hey, we can come build infrastructure for you. We'll come build roadways, trains, all this various infrastructure. Don't worry, pay us back in the future when you're more prosperous. But a lot of these countries, like you said, will never be able to pay back these billions of dollars in debt. So China goes, okay, you can't pay back this debt financially from a money perspective. Okay, this port, it's now under China ownership. This coal mine or this diamond mine or whatever it is, lithium spot, it's all under China ownership now. So they just end up, it's like that global game, that risk game. You know, where they're slowly
Yeah.
taking over the countries and taking over, and you see the red color take over. It's just like that, right?
Yeah.